How are you guys? Don't forget to leave a review and enjoy the story. Enjoy watching. The story begins. Noise, fun, a luxurious house, drinks, and treats. Everyone is talking about something. Amidst all the fun, Mrs. Alicia Osland sat alone, looking gloomy. After trying the mousse, she found it disgusting. The dish was so awful that she furiously started yelling at the whole room to call the chef. All eyes were on her. One of the guests asked, "Mrs. Osland again?" Not expecting such behavior, everyone began to discuss her heatedly. The guest said, "How awful. They say she has a heart as cold as the Lord of Darkness himself. They say she fired a bunch of servants." Lady Alicia asked, "Did he prepare these dishes?" The chef, covered in cold sweat and stammering, said that he had prepared them. Alicia asked, "Does he understand what awaits him? How does he imagine it? He dared to serve her such a dish." The chef fell to his knees, apologizing profusely. Those present said that she just wanted to humiliate someone. One of the guests added that it was cruel because the dishes were not bad. At that moment, Lady Osland just stood there silently. Suddenly, her loyal servant Gray appeared. He called her over to talk. The loyal servant offered to translate the words of his inarticulate mistress. She asked him what? He asked her to be quiet. The lady was indignant. Gray explained that his mistress had no intention of accusing the chef of serving unpalatable food. One of the guests angrily declares that he dare not defend her. After all, she complained directly to the chef. Gray denies everything. She wanted to say, "Thank you for treating her to such a delicious meal." The guests are shocked. Gray explained that when she made threatening remarks to the chef, she meant that she wanted to hire him and was just expressing her admiration for him. The guests think he's just talking nonsense. They're boiling with anger because there's a limit to how low you can sink. Gray asked them to look at the table. He said that 5 dishes had been served at each table and that the plates were empty. One of the guests still doesn't understand. Gray continues to present evidence, saying that since Ms. Alicia has no friends, she obviously ate everything herself. Those present finally believed him. The chef stammered and asked, "So, does that mean she was dissatisfied not because of his dishes?" Gray replied that he wasn't sure if this was the right place for that conversation. Then Lady Alicia's assistant asked the chef to show them his skills again, but only at the Osland house. Suddenly, Lady Alicia stands up behind her subordinate. He stands there in bewilderment. Gray tries to say that they will discuss the terms of employment and other details a little later. The chef stammers and utters the lady's name. She asks him impatiently if he has anything else to say. The chef bows and says that it is a great honor for him that she enjoyed his dishes. Lady Osland ungratefully declares that she does not need thanks. Gray explains that the chef has prepared such delicious dishes that it is only natural that he should be praised. Alicia pulls her servant aside. As she leaves, the lady declares that they are returning home. Gray replies yes. Alicia believes that he has disgraced her. Gray does not understand. Suddenly, she thanks him and tells him to stay by her side. Otherwise, she will not forgive him. Here Gray recalls his childhood. After his mother's death, he lived with his father and sister. Poverty was part of their daily life. He spent every day in tears. His sister kept saying how hopeless and whiny he was. His sister dreams of a rich life, of being noticed by a noble man and marrying him. And when that happens, they could say goodbye to their poor life and finally be happy. Gray asked if he could be happy too. His sister replied that he looked like an ordinary guy, so maybe he could become a knight or charm some noble girl and become her servant. Gray was very happy to hear this, but the sister added that to do this, he would have to work hard every day. It was also important to understand that a strong man must understand women's feelings. Gray asked what that meant. His sister replied that women need to be told the truth and have their feelings expressed directly, and not to forget to smile sincerely. And if you do that, even the most stubborn girl will be simply knocked off her feet. Gray thanked her for her advice. His sister replied that she was not particularly happy with the praise from her whiny brother, but she would train him strictly and raise him to be a true master. Gray was very happy. After a while, he realized that his sister was talking complete nonsense. He returned home. His father greeted him with a bottle of alcohol. Several years had passed since his sister left home, and his miserable life with his father continued. Gray asked why he was drinking. His father asked him to repeat the question. Then he added that Gray was no saint himself and had hidden many things in the basement. Gray was outraged and said that it was his money for admission to the Knight Academy. His father replied that he was very sorry and added that he had to spend it all to pay off his debts. But Gray had done a good deed for his father and could forgive him, right? His father asked. He asked what Gray was talking about. About his dream of becoming a knight? But such dreams were beyond his means. He should consider it a life lesson and start saving again. Gray jabbed his father and left home. He headed for the city. but he was very hungry and doubted his decision to leave without taking anything with him. He wondered if there was any work that included room and board, even though now was not the time to dream of such luxuries. Suddenly, he found an advertisement for a cleaner at the Duke's country residence. The salary was high, and room and board were included. Gray was pleasantly surprised. In the blink of an eye, he was in the office of the country residence in the Osland house. Maya Lorix, the head butler, was sitting in the office. The young man told her his story. She thought he was strange because it wasn't worth telling such details. She thought he was trying to elicit pity. Gray, covered in sweat, began to justify himself. He just didn't like to hide things. Maya looked at him sternly and asked if he was uncomfortable with the idea of working under her command. He replied that he thought it was self-evident. Unexpectedly, she pulled him toward her, looking at him calmly. Maya said that she was a woman and asked if he was uncomfortable working under a woman. Gray asked if that was a problem. Maya was surprised. Gray, embarrassed, pulled away and uncertainly complimented her. Was this motivation for him, or was it wrong? The girl smirks. She explains that if he works conscientiously, his background doesn't matter. Lately, they have been changing servants frequently, so they are short of workers. Gray exclaims, "What does that mean?" Maya explained that this mansion was the country residence of the Duke of Osland, prepared by Mr. Dillon for his daughter, Lady Alicia. Before starting work, she had to warn him. Alicia was an extremely capricious person, so she had to be careful not to upset her. Gray asked again. Turning away, Maya Lorix hoped he would last at least a month. Gray put on a shirt. He was given a clean and charming uniform for servant. Gray was pleased because before that he had been wearing old clothes. The new worker was over the moon with happiness. After changing into his uniform, he meets his mentor, Mori. The mentor compliments him. Both were pleased to meet each other. First, Gray went to do his first task, washing the windows. Mori gave him advice. The main thing is to wash in one direction and wipe the corners thoroughly. Mori noticed that he was doing well. Gray sat down to wet the rag and said that he had experience working as a cleaner. Mori replied that he had something to learn from him. Gray never imagined that his exhausting workdays would ever pay off. It was stressful for a beginner. Gray was a beginner, so how could he teach anyone in the Duke's house? But Mori reassured him, saying that he himself had only been working there for 3 weeks. As they talked, 2 maids stood in the distance discussing the young man, saying that her boyfriend couldn't help but laugh the other day. The other one started talking about how awful this guy was. Gray was shocked. Mori said calmly that most of the servants on this estate were like that. Okay, they gossip, but at least they do their jobs, he grumbled. Gray asked why this was happening at such a prestigious estate. Mori replied that he would tell him, but it would have to be between them. He leaned toward Gray to tell him the secret. At that moment, Lady Alicia came out and called out to them sternly. She asked what they were doing there. The maid accidentally knocked a vase with her hand, and it fell. Mori rushes over and asks Lady Alicia if she's all right. He says he heard a loud crash. Alicia looks at the vase in horror. Gray doesn't realize what's going on. He turns around and looks at the lady. She looks at him menacingly in response. Gray is embarrassed. She is very beautiful. The maids, frightened, began to apologize. The lady pompously made it clear that she did not need their help. The maids were surprised by these words. Alicia said she wanted them to leave quickly. The maid stood still and stammered that it was cruel. Alicia, not understanding, asked, "Do they have any more complaints?" The maids crossed their arms. They replied that they had no complaints and hurriedly left the place. Alicia, in turn, walked away in the other direction. Gray noticed that the maid's foot was injured. Alicia assigned the cleaning to the 2 remaining servants. Gray confirmed that they would clean everything up. As she left, the lady made a malicious sound. Mori concluded that the lady was strict. Gray asked strict. Mori began to state the facts. Of course, the maids are to blame, but to scold them so harshly. Gray agreed for a moment, but still thought the lady was kind. Mori asked Gray if he liked being dominated. Gray eagerly began to deny it. Gray said that Lady Alicia had never scolded him for breaking dishes. Mori agreed with him. Such an incident with a vase could cost the maid her lifetime salary. Gray continued, saying that it seemed Lady Alicia had noticed that the maid had injured her leg. Gray put forward a theory. Maybe she meant for her to go and get her foot treated more quickly. Mori thought about it. He asked, did she? He found it hard to believe. Gray agreed with him. He also reacted unusually, as such an incident would leave only a bad impression. Lady Alicia reminded him of his sister. She behaved in exactly the same way. Mori felt sorry for Gray. He didn't deserve a sister like that. After discussing this, Gray suggested they clean up quickly and asked where the dustpan was. At that moment, the lady went to the maids. Standing by the door, she uttered only a brief, "Okay." As she began to get the ointment for the wounds, she heard so many nasty things about herself. Her subordinates exclaimed, "How awful! What kind of arrogant person is she?" One of the maids said that if Alicia hadn't yelled, the vase wouldn't have broken. Another asked what she meant by "get out of here immediately." After all, everyone hates Alicia, and she shouldn't act like she's something special. While she was listening to all this, Gray approached from behind. He called out to the lady, but she tried to hide as quickly as possible. Gray gasped and noticed that she had dropped the ointment for wounds. In the garden, two servants were trimming the bushes. Gray asked if Lady Alicia always studied at home. In response, Mori said that Alicia had been suspended from the academy for an indefinite period due to certain problems. Gray asked why. Mori added that she was also forbidden from attending official events in the capital because she had made an aristocrat's daughter cry when she was a child. Mori said that her parents dream of finding her a husband as soon as possible, but there are rumors that several suitors have already fled from her in panic. Gray tried to say something, but Mori interrupted him, saying that those who ran away soon found new brides, and there is a rumor that if Alicia releases someone, a happy fate awaits him. Gray replied that it sounded suspicious and asked how they were able to find new partners so quickly. Mori replied that in any case, with her looks, it's no surprise that someone would fall in love with her. But right now, forbidden love between a simple servant and the Duke's daughter is too much. While Mori was talking, Gray tried to shut him up. He didn't understand why. Had he offended him? But behind him stood the lady. Smiling, she said, Oh, having fun, are we? Mori. He was frightened, and he ran away, remembering that Maya had given him a task. Lady Alicia just looked at him disapprovingly. He and Gray were left alone. He greeted her with a smile. He was happy that the weather was nice outside. Alicia asked if he was the new guy, Gray. Gray looked at her with shining eyes and was thrilled that she remembered him. For Alicia, this was basic. No matter how low a person's rank, she still remembered the names and faces of all her servants. Gray praised her. Of course, this was to be expected from a lady like her, but it was so nice for a subordinate to hear. She didn't understand why he was smiling constantly and decided to ask him about it. Gray's expression quickly changed, and he began to apologize. He was afraid he had upset the lady. However, Alicia was simply curious to know the reason for his smile. Gray replied that it was simply impossible for him not to smile when talking to such a beautiful lady. The lady was embarrassed and stood there puzzled. Did I say something wrong? She thought. Gray began to lay out the facts. She called them lowly commoners, but at the same time remembered the faces and names of every worker. Alicia blushed even more. Gray continued his speech. He admired her soul, and it was a great honor for him to serve her. Alicia was extremely embarrassed. She was starting to get angry, but she didn't understand where this anger was coming from. Alicia aggressively told him that he must be a happy man if he thought that way. Gray asked if it was true. Alicia said that he was the first person to say something like that. Gray didn't hear what she said and asked her to repeat it. In response, she yelled at him to go to work. Gray stammered and agreed. The mistress praised him, saying that thanks to him, the mansion was much cleaner, and asked him to continue working hard for her. Gray replied, Okay. With a sigh, she collapsed into bed, exhausted. Burying her face in the bedding, she whispered a name, Gray. On her bed lay a cute teddy bear, to whom Alicia told everything that was happening in her life. The lady thought to herself, she is 17 years old, and she still plays with dolls. It's even a little embarrassing. Alicia said she was so happy that the new servant had smiled at her. The bear didn't share her emotions. Was it the only reason she was so happy? Did that mean she liked him? Alicia blushed. She hugged the toy to her chest, asking it to be quiet. She wondered if she would be able to see Gray tomorrow, because he had no idea. After his first day at work, Gray thought that it had been a good day and that he would like to see Alicia tomorrow. In the morning at the office, Maya Lorix informed him that he would be going to a ball with the lady that evening at a marquis's house. Gray was stunned and asked her to repeat herself. She replied that it was part of her preparation for her return to high society, at least as a rehearsal. However, to avoid any problems, he would be there as an accompanying observer. Gray persisted, asking why him. After all, there were more experienced servants. Before this conversation, Lady Osland had stated that Gray was not the worst servant and that she would not go without him. Maya Lorix explained to him that the lady had strongly recommended that he be taken. After hearing this, his eyes sparkled with happiness, and he asked her again if she had said that. Already seated in the carriage, Lady Osland asked him not to disgrace the name of their house. Gray asked if this was where the ball would be held. When Lady Alicia began to get out of the carriage, the servant carefully offered her his hand. She, in turn, extended her hand to him and added that she hoped he would cope with his task. Upon entering the room, he saw a large crowd. Gray was amazed. So this is what a ball among aristocrats is like. For Osland, this place was noisy, so she decided to ask her servant about it. Alicia told him again not to embarrass her. Gray replied with an exclamation. Of course. Walking a little further, she ordered him to follow her. He obediently walked behind her. When they saw her, everyone was amazed. No one could believe that the Ice Lady had come to the ball. No one had seen her in a long time. Even amid all the luxury and glamour, she stood out for her beauty. The rumors about the Ice Lady were no exaggeration. She was the embodiment of elegance and aroused particular interest. Behind Lady Osland, one of the guests approached in elegant heels. As she approached, she had no idea that Alicia would be attending the ball. It turned out that Alicia was standing in front of her peers. Limrys Carnera, the daughter of a viscount, and Farah Astral, the daughter of a marquis. Limrys tried to provoke Alicia, saying that they hadn't seen each other since she was removed, right? Farah stood to her left and quietly greeted Alicia. Osland pronounced their names with an impassive face. Limrys couldn't calm down. How could someone so unpopular appear here? What could it mean? Alicia simply walked away after these words. Limrys called out to her when she saw that Alicia had paid no attention to her and left. But Alicia was not going to put up with all this and came back to sort things out. Farah, frightened, just gasped and said her name, to which Mrs. Osland snapped. She was, as always, in her usual form. Farah did not understand her words. Alicia went on the offensive, saying that Farah's outfit was terrible and that she looked like a real provincial with no taste whatsoever. With makeup and a dress like that, she would be better off staying at home. Farah had no idea what was going on and just stood there, rooted to the spot, with only one question. What? Alicia resumed the conversation, recommending a boutique to her, hoping that Farah might look at least a little better. Farah couldn't say anything else, so she sat down and started crying. She screamed that it was too much and that she was being cruel to her. The guests were stunned. Then Limrys came running up and started saying that Farah looked great in that outfit and that Alicia had no right to say such horrible things, that she knew what she was talking about. The guests began to express how awful Alicia was, belittling other people in front of everyone, without even batting an eyelid. She was the Ice Lady. Alicia just smirked at these insults. Limrys sat down next to Farah and whispered in her ear that she understood her better than anyone else, that she would always be on her side, and that they should leave. Gray silently watched this scene unfold. Farah began to whisper how much she hated Lady Osland. Through her tears, she said that whenever they met, Lady Osland would mock her. Then, unexpectedly, she began to shout the same words and ordered her to stay away from her. Alicia coldly told Farah to do as she wished. Farah, lowering her head, did as she wished with her permission. Unexpectedly, Gray shouted, asking everyone to wait. Alicia, Limrys, Farah, and the other guests looked at him in surprise. Limrys told him that he was just a servant and asked what right he had to say anything. Gray apologized to everyone and tried to justify the lady, saying that they had misunderstood her. Farah did not understand what was going on. The guests asked how they had misunderstood. Alicia, in turn, looked at him with displeasure. Explained, Lady Alicia is a kind-hearted person, but she finds it difficult to express her true feelings. Wanted to tell Lady Farah more. Alicia Osland interrupted him. She yelled at him, asking what he was talking about. He translated the lady's words, saying that a more beautiful dress would look better on Lady Farah. If Farah didn't mind, Alicia would be happy to go shopping with her. What did Farah think? Gray insisted that this was exactly what she meant. Farah and Limrys shouted in unison, "What?" The guests were stunned by what they heard. Limrys angrily told him to stop talking nonsense, because her words were mocking. Gray asked Farah's permission to ask her a couple of questions. She agreed. At that moment, Gray crouched down next to Farah and asked her. She didn't choose this dress and makeup herself, did she? Lady Limrys chose it, right? She was a little embarrassed and agreed with him. Gray continued the conversation. This is just a suggestion, of course, but does she often hear unpleasant comments about her appearance? And not just from Lady Alicia. And every time she heard words of comfort from Limrys. Farah was shocked. How could he know about this? Limrys burst into their conversation, grabbing her friend by the shoulder, and angrily asks Gray what he thinks he's doing. He's making someone out to be the villain just because they didn't sit quietly and listen. And anyway, in her opinion, Alicia is to blame. How many people has she already hurt with her words? The problem is not her inability to be sincere. To her, Alicia is an outcast, and anyone who stands up for her is crazy too. One of the guests theorized that she must have been plotting something. Another guest replied that it was hard to believe. Gray declared to everyone that he was the lady's ally. Gray shouted that from now on, he would be the one to convey Lady Alicia's true feelings. And he would definitely prove that Alicia was not an ice queen at all. Unable to restrain herself, Alicia silenced her servant with the words, "Enough is enough." Gray calmed down and began to say something hesitantly, but he was interrupted. Alicia gave him a serious look and told him to know his place. To her, he was disgracing her family. Limrys asked in confusion what, but Alicia looked at her, so she fell silent. After what happened, Alicia decided to leave the ball. The lady apologized for her departure and wished everyone a good time. Gray shouted her name in horror and ran after her. When they left the venue, Gray called her name again. Gray lay down on the dirty asphalt, buried his face, and begged for forgiveness. Alicia began to express her dissatisfaction. She asked him not to disgrace her name. Then she insulted him, saying how smug he was, even though he was just a cleaner. The worst, unbearable. She couldn't believe it. Having drawn her conclusions, Alicia decided to teach her subordinate some manners. The servant did not understand the meaning of her words. She continued, "Did he not hear me? From now on, he will always serve her." Stumbling, he clarified, "So she wants him to be her personal servant?" After these words, a slight blush appeared on the lady's face. In response, she called him too talkative. Did he have any objections? Gray denied it. Since the poor servant was lying on the dirty asphalt, the lady decided to give him a hand. The subordinate looked at her questioningly. The lady explained to him that since she hadn't had time to dance with anyone at the ball, he would be her escort until the carriage arrived. The servant tried to object, but the lady grabbed his hand and pulled him toward her. At that moment, she said she didn't like to repeat herself twice. Both were embarrassed in front of each other, and their dance looked a little awkward because Gray did not know how to dance. Alicia didn't understand what was going on. She smiled and advised him to try harder. On a dark night, under the moon, among the trees, the river, and near a magnificent fountain, the servant and the lady danced. The lady literally floated in their dance, but the young man also tried his best, and it was evident on his face. When she got home, the lady was getting ready for bed. Sitting on the bed, she told her teddy bear what had happened today. She smiled as she talked about how cocky Gray was, and at the same time, she was embarrassed. The bear asked how she could be in a good mood if she had gone to the ball she hated. In retaliation, the girl grinned and happily recounted how he had saved her when she was about to cry. The hostess continued to talk about how Bear admired the guy. The plush creature compared him to the fairy tale prince she had been waiting for. The girl disagreed with this opinion. He was a commoner, not a prince. She decided that the man of her destiny would sound more appropriate. The lady was very happy. She tossed and turned in bed, hugging herself, and thought that perhaps she was getting ahead of herself. And then she called him an unacceptable servant. Gray had fallen right in her heart. She thought about how she would have to raise him properly starting tomorrow. Her happy laughter could be heard from the street. At that moment, Gray was standing on the street, and a shiver ran through his body. Suddenly, Gray cried out that he had slipped up. The night passed, and he realized the seriousness of what had happened. He had said too much at the ball. He could have handled the situation more intelligently. Gray realized that he shouldn't have stood out in such a large crowd. Gray couldn't stand it when the ladies were insulted, but because of this situation, terrible rumors would start spreading again. He needed to think everything through. He was convinced once again that the lady was kind. Before he came to the mansion, his life had been terrible. Gray remembered how he was called dirty or black filth, disgusting, how he was told not to get in the way, what heavy loads he carried just to earn a living, how he was told that without stealing, thieving, and begging, he was good for nothing. Gray survived from day to day, and it was Lady Alicia who provided him with a good life, so he needed to become stronger. He pondered these thoughts while washing the floors. A lady approached him from behind and called out to him. Startled, he stumbled slightly over her name. Turning to face her, she grabbed his arm and led him away, saying only one word, "Come." Gray asked where she was taking him and why, but she did not answer. It turned out that they had come to the head butler's office. Maya Lorix, looking puzzled, asked her, "Does she really want to make him her personal servant? Is she serious? That's ridiculous." Alicia, her face flushed again, presented her arguments. She simply wanted to train this insolent, rude cleaner to a decent level. Maya Lorix and Alicia Osland stared sternly at each other, and a pause ensued. Gray felt uncomfortable watching this scene. The pause was broken by the head butler, who reported that she was aware of what had happened at yesterday's ball. She read the report provided to her by this foolishly honest cleaner, written with remarkable thoroughness. Maya glanced at him. Gray était un incomprending homme. Alicia approached the servant and grabbed him by the cheeks. She argued fiercely that in that case, she should understand how stupid Gray was, right? As the mistress, she couldn't just ignore such a servant. At that moment, Gray shed a tear and simply mumbled, "I'm sorry, Miss Alicia." Maya testified, "If he's so hopeless, why not fire him?" The guy shuddered and asked again. Alicia replied that even though he was a useless servant, Firing him right away was not a decision befitting an aristocrat. She just needed to show a little restraint. Both looked at her with incomprehension. She was certainly not the one to talk about restraint. The lady asked irritably, "Do you have anything to say?" They replied that no, they didn't. Maya concluded that she held him in high regard. He was very diligent, and his behavior yesterday could only be explained by his excessive devotion. Appointing him as Alicia's personal servant to act as a translator for her sometimes misinterpreted words was a good idea. However, sharing not only meals, but also a bed with him was going too far. Maya tried to convey this with anger. Alicia had a different opinion. With a sly look in her eyes, she convinced Maya that if a nobleman clung to conventions forever, there would be no progress. Maya continued to argue. She spoke not as a noblewoman, but as a woman. Such behavior is simply strange. Maya suggested that Alicia saw the servant as her first true friend, but she had no sense of distance. Alicia asked a commoner like that to be her friend? Alicia began to say fuck and show everyone that she found him repulsive. Maya decided to make a final decision. In order for him to become a personal servant, he would have to pass a test. Task 1. Make tea. Gray was sweating with fear. He had never done this before. He had only seen maids do it. Moreover, clean water was a rarity in his life. But still, plucking up his courage, he poured boiling water over the tea leaves, placed them on a saucer, and served the lady. Maya took the saucer, took a sip, and placed the cup on the saucer. Gray asked her what she thought of the tea. Maya expressed her dissatisfaction. From her point of view, the water was too hot. The tea leaves were clumped together, and when he put the cup down, there should have been no sound. If the water rippled, it meant that the servant was even worse than a second-rate servant. She found his posture terrible. A servant is a reflection of his master's status. Gray must learn to hide his insecurity. She sternly punished him, saying that he was definitely not suitable to be a personal servant. Seeing this spectacle, Lorix became convinced that his duties as a personal servant were prematurely closed to him. Alicia thought to herself that Maya was just looking for something to complain about, interfering with their business relationship between mistress and servant. Lady Alicia stopped her, saying that she simply wanted to help the inexperienced Gray grow. Gray excitedly called out to Alicia, but it turned out that the head butler was impressed with his perfection from the very first time, so she suggested moving on to the next task. Alicia asked again with irritation. She calmly replied to her anger that she had not said there would only be one task. They began to explain the next task to him. A personal servant must be able to do everything, from preparing the lady in the morning to changing her clothes. Shocked, Gray asked her again. He was ready for anything, but not for changing clothes. Gray imagined Alicia sitting on the bed in her nightgown and offering him her leg, telling him that he had to do it. Maya was interested in the question. Didn't Gray think about anything like that? After such a question, a blush appeared on his face, and he denied everything. It turned out that a specially trained maid was responsible for changing clothes, and now he had to comb the lady's hair. It was part of the morning routine. Nevertheless, trying to muster up his courage, he set to work. Stumbling over his words, he asked if he could begin. When Alicia turned to him to give her answer, he became even more embarrassed. As he began to comb her hair, he noticed how silky it was and how divine it smelled. But he remembered that Maya was watching him, so he tried to concentrate. During the process, Gray asked for the lady's opinion. Alicia was pleased and praised him. After her words, he remembered how he used to comb his sister's hair. Remembering this, he realized that the experience he had gained from his sister was not in vain. Then he noticed that the lady's hair was tangled near her ear. Noticing this, he informed Alicia and said that he would untangle it with his fingers, to which she responded positively. Gray asked her to let him know if it hurt and got to work. She replied that everything was fine. The moment he touched her ears, she became embarrassed. Thoughts raced through her head. His fingers and breath tickled her ear. Meanwhile, the mistress was already shaking her head in embarrassment. Seeing his actions from the sidelines, Maya realized that there were no problems with his basic skills. Maya came up close to him and advised him to be gentler with the mistress's hair, as it was very soft. Gray was embarrassed. She continued her criticism by asking another question. What's wrong with him? She noticed that his movements had become stiff. Had he forgotten how to do it? He hesitantly answered yes to her questions. Looking at his face, she realized that his breathing was uneven. She asked him with a sidelong glance if he had lost his composure at the sight of Alicia. She called him a bad servant. Gray only gasped in response. Alicia noticed everything that was happening. She stood up and fiercely questioned Maya about what was going on between her and her servant. Maya waved her hand and replied, joking aside. Maya had hoped for at least basic care, but unfortunately, Gray couldn't even manage that, so she couldn't trust him to take care of her mistress. She expressed her concerns. If Gray stepped out of line even a little, she would immediately report it to her master. Alicia gave her a menacing look and understood who she was talking about, but decided to ask her anyway. It was her father. She gave her an ultimatum. If she told him, she would not forgive her. In response to this threat, Maya explained that she was the master's personal servant, so her threats had no effect on her. Alicia growled in anger. Gray, summoning all his willpower, confidently declared that there was no need to worry, because a commoner like him would never dare to touch a noble lady like Alicia. Alicia pulled on his sleeve. He cried out in pain. Alicia turned away and made a sound of displeasure. Gray asked why she did that. Alicia puffed out her cheeks and made another sound of discontent. Then he added that he had not expressed himself clearly and decided to rephrase what he had said. He sincerely wanted Lady Alicia to be happy, and he understood perfectly well what kind of man would be worthy of her. Maya agreed with his words. But to be sure, she asked one final question. Would he be willing to take on the role of interpreter again if her complex personality caused others to dislike her? Maya said that the lady's reputation had improved after that incident, but his position was still extremely precarious. Yesterday, everything ended well, but next time it might be different. She asked him again if he was willing to be her interpreter. Maya analyzed the situation in her head. For a mistress who was hopelessly awkward in communication, having a translator like Gray was a huge blessing. Now her reputation was so tarnished that she was nicknamed the Ice Lady. A translator could be a bridge to overcome this gap, but at the same time, it was a dangerous role for a servant. In aristocratic society, a commoner is dust that can disappear at the snap of a finger. And yesterday's action was borderline. Maya decided for herself. If he chickened out, he was not fit to be a translator. If not, he would have to devote himself entirely to his mistress. But the main question remained unanswered. Would he be able to cover himself with words or? With a confused look on his face, Gray replied that he did not understand. Maya's eyes widened. After a short pause, she asked what. Gray began to explain everything. It was just that yesterday, he couldn't stand by and watch his mistress being misunderstood. His feelings were mixed. If we're talking about some kind of determination, he wasn't sure he had it. He himself did not want to be fired, and he did not want to be a disgrace to the Aslan family. And he really regretted his harsh words. Gray was confused. He did not know what to do. He said he just wanted as many people as possible to love Ms. Alicia, and he would do his best to let those around him know what she was really like. During this touching speech, Gray smiled. Alicia, embarrassed, looked at him with sparkling eyes. Hearing his speech, Maya smiled and told him how kind and honest he was. She believed his words and allowed him to be her translator. At the end of the conversation, she frowned and threatened to keep an eye on him and not to forget about it. Gray was about to leave, but Alicia called him back. When he approached her, she grabbed his hand. Alicia rolled her eyes and reminded him of his words about not touching the lady. From the lady's point of view, Gray did not fully understand the situation, so she informed him that she would be having an educational conversation with him. Gray, with an agitated look on his face, questioningly said her name and asked why she had grabbed his arm so tightly. The mistress and her subordinate went to the park. There they sat close together on an iron bench. Their shoulders and arms touched. Gray was anxious and shy about sitting so close to the lady. It was beyond the pale, so he called out to her and asked if it wasn't going too far. She frowned and ordered him to sit down and be quiet. They sat even closer. The lady's chest pressed against the servant's arm. Gray decided to inquire. Did that mean she listened to the butler more than him? She stammered and replied that that was not what she meant at all. Embarrassed, she glanced at him sideways. Taking a short break from talking to each other, they looked up at the clouds floating in the sky. Suddenly, the lady praised him, saying what an unusual person he was. At that moment, Alicia decided to tell her story. Since childhood, she had been unable to express her feelings honestly. The only person who understood her was her mother, but she had passed away. Alicia was disliked because she only provoked hostility, and she was sure that she would spend her whole life that way. Gray listened attentively. Spontaneously, Alicia turned to face her subordinate. With her gentle hand, she touched the shy servant, and she herself blushed. She continued what she had started and said that only he could see her true essence. Not the Ice Queen, but Alicia Aslan. A spark flew between them. With a reddened face and a smile, she said that now she would never let him go and that he belonged only to her. She asked him to always put her above everything else. As he pondered her words, he became sad. He remembered how his sister had abandoned him, his father who had spent all his money on debts, and the people who had mistreated him. Lowering his head, he asked the lady again, can he really rely on her? Gray decided to open up to her about his feelings. In his entire life, he had never felt needed by anyone. Lifting his head, he shed a tear. Noticing his tears, she asked him why he was crying. She explained that from the outside, it looked like she was hurting him. Covering his face with his hand, Gray apologized. The best way to comfort him was to hug him. Alicia stood up slightly and said, "All right, there's nothing we can do about it." She pulled him close to her chest. She stroked his back to calm him down. Then he suddenly remembered that he was literally lying face down on the lady's bare chest. Blushing and opening his eyes wide, he was taken aback. At that moment, the lady, also blushing, asked him to say something. He replied that he was full of strength and energy. The next day, Gray looked at his watch and realized it was time to wake Alicia. Entering her chambers, he told her to wake up, as it was already morning. In response to his words, Lady Alicia moaned. Getting out of bed, Lady Alicia did not expect the morning to come so quickly, so she asked her subordinate about it. Gray summed up that Alicia was weak in the mornings. The mistress was dressed in a short shirt with a bow at the chest and ribbons decorating it. Embarrassed, she sat on the bed and, spreading her arms, asked to be picked up. But Gray, as an intelligent and sensible servant, asked her in a serious tone to get up on her own. Thoughts raced through his head that love between an aristocrat and a commoner was a path to nowhere. No one would be happy with that. It was obvious to everyone. It seemed that his iron loyalty would be seriously tested in the near future. Being a personal servant was very difficult for him. He understood that she had a hard time in the morning, but not to such an extent. Every morning, when his subordinate had to wake his mistress, she set a condition. If he did not carry her in his arms, she would not get out of bed. After asking a second time to get out of bed herself, she insisted on her own way. Then Gray picked up his mistress and carried her. Her nightgown slipped down a little, exposing almost her entire chest. As Gray carried her, her nearly bare breasts touched his shirt. He exclaimed her name, and she giggled in response. Getting down from his arms, she apologized, still blushing, saying that she had gone to bed late, which is why she woke up at such an hour. Then she asked him to comb her hair. Various dishes were served for breakfast. One plate had scrambled eggs and 2 pieces of toast. The other had lettuce and tomatoes. Freshly squeezed juice was served as a drink. Alicia looked at today's menu with interest. The number of servants had increased at breakfast. One of them was a new maid. She held a vase with a puzzled look on her face. The mistress admired the vase with a penetrating gaze. Alicia began to talk about it with enthusiasm, pausing slightly. In her opinion, it looked different from the one with the beautiful roses that had been there yesterday. With a look of anxiety on her face, maid stammered that these flowers had been brought to her by her parents from the village. Alicia's mood quickly changed. With a certain anger, she asked where the new girl was from, because her mistress had never seen such flowers before. The maid was very frightened by her mistress's anger. She thought that the village flowers spoiled the view, apologized, and began to remove them in tears. As she bent down to clean everything up, Gray stopped her abruptly. He asked her not to remove them. The maid watched the scene with wide eyes. Gray began to translate the lady's words. Alicia simply wanted to say that she had never seen such a beautiful flower. Could it be that it only grows in her village? That was exactly what she meant. The maid cried out in shock. Alicia added to her subordinate's answer that this was not exactly what she meant. It was just that, as an aristocrat, she could not allow herself not to know the names of flowers. Gray added that, simply put, the lady just wanted to know the name of the flower. Lady Alicia turned to him and roared his name. On top of that, her face turned red. Watching this scene, the new maid became embarrassed. She approached Alicia with a smile, holding the flower, and began to tell her about it. Gray saw this cute scene, smiled, and went about his business. The maid noticed this, interrupted her story, called out to him, and ran towards him. The maid thanked him for his help with sparkling eyes. Putting one hand on his hip and stroking his hair with the other, he said indifferently, "You're welcome." She continued to express her gratitude with embarrassment. The maid gained confidence in her new friend and decided to tell him her story. It turned out that the girl had come to the capital and had been unable to settle in for a long time. All the while, she had a desire to return to the village. Maid enjoyed his kindness and warmth, comparing him to her brother back home. But Gray didn't share her feelings. He didn't see anything special in it. Maid asked him to be her companion, if he didn't mind. Gray smiled and replied that he didn't mind and hoped to get along with her. To himself, he thought how lonely she must be without her family back in the village. Maid continued the introduction. She said that she was younger than him and was his subordinate, so he could call her whatever he wanted. Alicia unexpectedly approached from behind. Smiling, Maid asked, "So she's one of those who talks like that?" and muttered. Gray changed his mind. He hesitated and insisted on the concept of personal boundaries. After all, they were colleagues, and it would look bad in front of others. Maid looked at him with a puzzled expression. In that case, she asked to be called May, and with a smile on her face, she waved goodbye and left. After Maid left, Alicia grabbed Gray by the shoulder and asked about their relationship, thinking that they had become close. At that moment, Gray gasped in horror. He noticed that she had free time after breakfast and that lately, Lady Alicia had been spending a lot of time in the library. This time was valuable to him too, as he could read and study. Watching the lady sit pensively and read, Gray blushed. During another reading session, Gray reminded her about lunch. Alicia hadn't noticed how quickly time had passed and thanked the servant. Gray was curious about what book she was reading, but she said it was a secret. Alicia joked that the book she was reading was about her and the servant becoming a sweet couple and spending their days together. Gray replied that he would definitely try to read it next time. The servants had a separate dining room. During lunch, they ate separately from the ladies. For lunch, the workers were served a leaf salad and a croissant. Gray let out a sound of joy. He had lunch next to Mori. He said that he didn't think Gray would be able to win the lady's favor. He noticed that thanks to Gray, there were fewer servants who spoke ill of the lady. Gray was happy, but he didn't think this event was related to him. He thought it was because Lady Alicia was very kind. Mori was jealous. He was also struck by her beauty. Suddenly, he shouted to the whole room how much he loved May. Her carefree smile was simply incredible to him. Gray sat and watched it all with a disapproving look on his face. For starters, Mori had to find out how old she was. She was still too young for him. Meanwhile, the maid stood by the table and exclaimed enthusiastically. The new girl approached Gray and asked if he was having lunch. Looking into her eyes, he said her name with a questioning tone. Mason puffed out her cheeks and asked him to just call her May. Gray waved his hand and said her name with a smile. The maid smiled and thanked him with a smirk. Then she waved her hand and happily announced that she was going to continue working and asked to chat later. But Gray was confused. He began to express the misunderstanding that had arisen between them, but she had already said goodbye. After she left, Mori called out to the servant. Gray ignored him. Mori bitterly shouted that Gray was moving too fast with her. Gray explained that it wasn't what he thought. Switching from one girl to another, he was already shouting at the top of his lungs that from now on, he would start new love. For him, it was time for MILFs. And that was where the power lay. Gray didn't understand what kind of mature woman his friend meant. Then he thought of the head butler, because she was the only mature woman in the house. And he was right in his guesses. She was usually strict and had a difficult personality, but Mori decided for no reason that she would be gentle and affectionate with him. Mori asked Gray for his opinion on this idea. Gray, in turn, thought with horror what a terrible idea it was. But Mori stood his ground, deciding that if he cleaned Maya's room, he would deserve praise. Mori craved her attention. At that moment, Maya was standing behind him, listening to his speech. When he finished, she asked him about his desire for praise from her. Did he really want to thank so much? After that, Maya made an announcement. In that case, he would clean twice as much in the coming month. And, of course, he would not touch her room. After hearing this statement, he agreed with fear in his eyes. Then she moved on to comment on Gray. His plate was small. Maya wondered why. Gray apologized, embarrassed. For him, the food was so delicious that it was even awkward to eat it. Hearing his words, she closed her eyes and spoke about the importance of food, especially since it was free, so he needed to eat properly. It would be bad if he didn't have enough strength when he needed it. After that, Maya served him new dishes. Gray asked, "What is this?" Maya gave him a stern look and began to explain that he was wrong about her. She was not a girl with a difficult personality. According to her, if servants work conscientiously, she is capable of praising them. Then she said goodbye and left. Mori fell to the floor and began to cry. He was jealous that Gray was getting attention from the head butler. He hysterically asked why everything was always given to him. Mori became even more angry when he saw a piece of cake in Gray's hands. Noticing this, he demanded that Gray return his oasis. Gray objected because the cake had been given to him as a gift. Finally, she heard about the end of the lesson and the review of the material. Alicia exhaled and lay down on the bed, burying her face in the pillow. At sunset, after finishing her exhausting lessons, Lady Alicia shows herself from a different side. Gray noticed how hard she tried at her studies every day. Alicia wearily asked him to praise her. Gray told her how hardworking she was. It wasn't enough for Alicia, so she asked for more. He continued to say how beautiful and perfect she was in everything. The words beauty and talent seemed to have been created for her. Alicia wasn't sure about his words, so she asked if they were true. He gave a positive answer. According to him, he had never met a woman more beautiful than her. Alicia responded with disappointment. She thought there must be other beautiful and outstanding girls. Alicia was jealous of him. She shared her thoughts with him, turning away from him and touching her hair. If a girl like that appeared in his life, he would choose her over someone as complicated and capricious as her. She told him this with resentment and disappointment. Gray replied that nothing of the sort would happen. Alicia said that no matter how you looked at it, she was just a problematic and inconvenient woman. Then Gray expressed his desire to ask the lady a question. Turning around and looking for him with her eyes, she called out to him with a questioning tone. But he was just as worried about their relationship as she was. Gray, like Alicia, was afraid of losing her. Since the conversation had turned to this topic, why not ask her opinion? What if another servant appeared, more handsome and intelligent than him? Would he be immediately dismissed from his job? Hearing his words, she seemed to snap. Alicia jumped out of bed with wide eyes and a flushed face and told him not to joke like that, because he was her destiny. Gray was stunned, but when she said it, she regretted it. Realizing her mistake, she just said, "Oh." Gray got down on one knee and assured her of his devotion. For him, there was no one special except her. Then Gray noted that he was waiting for her to understand his answer. Gray pulled her hand toward him and leaned in to kiss it. This made her blush. Gray raised his head and, with a happy expression on his face, assured her of her importance to him. She was first among all, no matter what anyone said. Alicia pulled her hands away and, reaching the limit of her embarrassment, moved away. Frightened, Gray asked about her condition. She crossed her arms in front of her and started shouting something. Then Gray picked her up and carried her. Alicia was happy. He carried her to the bedroom and was about to put her on the bed. The lady became confused. With horror on her face, she said that it was too early for her. It turned out that he did not want to take her virginity. Gray just wanted to carry her to bed and wish her good night, but the lady thought otherwise. Gray said that it was okay if it was too early. If she was tired, she would fall asleep with pleasure. Alicia still insisted, still not understanding what she was saying. Her face was flushed. She didn't understand what pleasure he was talking about, because the first time is always painful. Gray was puzzled. What kind of pain did she mean? Maybe a headache from sleeping too long? Gray assured her that it would be painless and promised to wake her up. Alicia asked him how serious he was about what he was doing. Did he understand that this was a commoner taking possession of an aristocrat? With confidence in his voice, he replied that he took everything concerning her seriously. Lying in bed, Alicia asked him to be gentle with her. She wanted to stay with him a little longer. Gray, gesturing with his hands, confidently declared that she would be immersed in the enchanting world of dreams. Leaning over her slightly, he pointed his finger at the number 1 and said, "1 sheep." Then a second and third sheep appeared. The lady, with a sweet blush on her face, mumbled that she felt like she was in a dream. As he continued counting sheep, he was interrupted with a question about what kind of game this was. But the lady seemed to have other games in store for him. Gray asked again. There was a pause. After a moment of silence, Alicia threw the servant onto her bed. The lady asked playfully with a sly look on her face, "A disobedient servant must be punished, mustn't he?" Gray, completely embarrassed, could only utter a short, He was terrified that Maya would see them. But the lady was willing to take the risk. She considered it the best punishment. Gray trembled like a leaf, but still agreed this time. The lady moved closer and asked shyly, "Is it okay?" Everything was happening in the lady's bedroom, and the teddy bear sitting there was simply shocked by what was happening. Hearing his words, the lady turned onto her back. She turned to him with a slight sadness and asked him once again about his desire. The most serious test of endurance was bathing after dinner. Sweaty, he endured it. Gray shouted that bathing together was too much. Alicia puffed out her cheeks. Gray said he wouldn't agree to it, even if she sulked like that. Alicia continued to stand her ground. She told him to stop talking nonsense, implying protest, since Gray did not want to obey the order. With an impassive face, Gray replied that even if she threatened him, it wouldn't help. Out of anger, she kicked him. Then he shouted about the unfairness of such treatment. Alicia turned away and began to cry. Sobbing, she talked about the foam getting in her eyes and her going blind. She asked who would help her wash her hair, but Gray wasn't fooled by such tricks. Then Alicia suggested putting a blindfold on him. The main thing was that he couldn't see the body, right? If she tied it on, everything would be fine. The next second, they were standing in the shower. Gray had a blindfold on. He couldn't see anything, so he tried to feel his way around with his hands. The naked lady sat next to her servant. Because of the blindfold, the servant's hands moved to the lady's waist. She smiled and asked where he was putting his hands. Gray was confused. He shouted in embarrassment, asking what she was talking about. The girl giggled, said his name with admiration, and said that he couldn't because it was too early. Alicia pressed herself against the servant and asked him to wash her hair with shampoo. With an innocent look on her face, she called him over and asked him to spend more time with her. Gray, unable to withstand such pressure, gestured with his hands and shouted about the prohibition. Alicia smiled maliciously. She was insincerely sorry, but she was pleased that he finally saw her as a woman. Gray recoiled and said that such jokes were too much. Reaching the bathroom door, she made a confession to him. According to Alicia, if it was Gray, she was ready to open up to him. Gray, his face flushed and his eyes wide, remained silent. The lady said goodbye and left. Finally calming down, he decided to put his thoughts in order. Because of the lady, he had lost his vigilance. Stepping out of the bath, she stood before him in a short dress with a low neckline. She asked him how he liked her outfit. Not expecting such a turn of events, Gray asked her why she wasn't in the bath. Alicia frowned and said she had gotten out a long time ago. She asked what he had been doing. Gray picked up his sword and admitted that he was reminiscing about the days when he dreamed of entering night school. Alicia asked him again in surprise. Gray happily explained his dreams to her, but if he had gone there, he would never have met her. He was glad that everything had turned out the way it did. The girl said something questioningly. Now she understood how he had ended up in her mansion. Gray proudly declared his ability to protect her. Cupping her cheeks, the lady squealed with delight at how stunning her servant was. She squealed, "I love you," several times. From a sweet lady glowing with joy, she suddenly turned stern. Lady Alicia sternly punished him, saying that now that he had left the past behind, he must try harder as her personal servant. And again, switching from stern to sweet, she approached him and stroked his cheek with her hand, adding that one day he would be hers. But Gray roughly removed her hand from his face. The lady stood in shock. Puzzled, Gray quickly explained to her. It turned out that he couldn't allow anyone to touch him while he was sweaty. Mistress Alicia, offended, yelled at him for misinterpreting her words. She just wanted to touch him. That's all. She insisted that she wasn't thinking about anything like that. There should be no talk of pheromones. Gray remained silent. Moreover, she had other things on her mind. Offended, she began to leave. Noticing the evening chill, she wished him good night. In response, he also wished her good night and continued to stand in the night garden. When she was gone, the young man thanked her for such a wonderful day. Unfortunately, she did not hear him. Standing on the grass and staring at the mansion, he sank into thought. A thought flashed through his mind. If he ran away, it would be the height of meanness. He and the lady were too different. She was a noblewoman, and he was an ordinary servant, a commoner. At that moment, Limri sat there, baring her teeth. Sitting on a chair in the mansion with a broken mirror, which she had clearly broken herself, she aggressively shouted Alicia's name. Raising her leg and bringing her hands to her temple, she swore that she would never forgive Alicia. One day, someone drove up to Lady Oslin's mansion. May, seeing the approaching carriage, rushed to Gray. She called him over to her. Gray stood with his back to her, holding a broom. Hearing someone calling him, he turned around. He became interested in what was happening. Why was May in such a hurry? May, her eyes wide, shouted about some guest, and Alicia was annoyed by the visitor's arrival. Gray asked her again and asked for the guest's name. The girl hesitated before answering, then said the name, Limri's Karnara. Unexpectedly, the sound of heels echoed through the room. Limri's, with a grim expression on her face, muttered a short "hey" and asked how much longer she had to wait. Oslind answered her. Alicia stood on the lawn with her back to the guest and told her to leave and never come back. Limri's, with a fierce look on her face and a threatening tone, asked her to wait a second. Limri's sat down on a chair with a soft cushion and expressed her dissatisfaction. She did not understand such an attitude towards a friend who had come to visit her. With a puzzled look on her face, Alicia asked who was whose friend. Limri's eyes widened, but she did not relent. She continued, according to her, because they study at the same academy, they are classmates. Alicia looked away and asked, "Is that the only reason?" Limri's mouth fell open in shock. Gray approached with a beaming face and addressed Alicia with a question. Perhaps Limri's had some kind of problem, since she had come to the Oslin family's house? This was Gray's suggestion. He offered to listen. Ms. Alicia agreed with this suggestion. Lowering her head slightly, Alicia, with a grim face and eyes burning with anger, announced the breakup of the Karnara family. Gray shouted, "What?" Alicia explained Limri's situation. She was considered stupid, being the daughter of Viscount, because she used Farah, the Marquis's daughter, as a cover for herself. In aristocratic society, this was not acceptable. Limri's blamed her friend for everything that had happened. Farah was from the Astral family, and she believed that Farah had latched onto her like an abandoned puppy. Her argument was that it was fun. She had the nerve to say that it wasn't so bad. After listening to this nonsense, Lady Alicia considered her current situation deserved. "That's what happens when you get cocky," she said, directly referring to her arrogance. Clenching her hands into fists and with a certain amount of fear, Limri shouted that Alicia should take responsibility for her actions because she had told Lady Farah everything. For some reason, Lady Limri's considered Lady Alicia to be at fault. In response to all the accusations, Alicia calmly said that she deserved it. Lady Limrys began to hysterically cry. In tears, she threw herself at Lady Alicia, apologized, and begged for help. Unable to tolerate her hysterics any longer, Mrs. Alicia asked her to stop. So be it, she decided to give her a chance to speak. Pulling herself together, with a focused expression, Limrys asked for help in repairing the relationship between her and Farah. Not wanting to listen any longer, Alicia turned away and pointed to the exit. Limrys, her face tear-stained, asked hysterically for her to wait. Turning back to her interlocutor, baring her teeth, Alicia asked if she understood the words she had spoken. Alicia remembered how Limrys had treated her, mentioning it in the dialogue, and demanded that she not forget it. Lady Limrys hesitated in her response. With a friendly expression on his face, Gray approached and mentioned the friendship between them. With these words, he hinted to the lady that she should help Mrs. Limrys. The Viscount's daughter, shouting, agreed with the servant's opinion. Limrys leaned her shoulder against the servant and praised him, saying that at first she thought he was a beggar, but it turns out that if you look inside, that's not the case at all. Lady Alicia, with horror on her face, silently ignored him. But the silence did not last long. Then it turned into aggression. Was she seducing his servant? Limrys opened her mouth and hiccuped. Gray immediately rushed over to fix the situation. The subordinate stood behind her and asked her not to mock Limrys. Bending over the guest, Alicia took her face with a sly look and generously decided to help with Farah. But on one condition. The condition was that she must become her slave. Lady Limrys, her face filled with horror, shouted at her what? Lady Limrys could not accept such a condition. Then Mistress Alicia asked with a smirk if she was sure of her words. She was such an unpleasant person. Who else could she rely on? Alicia held out her hand to seal the deal. In return, Limrys, red with shame, got down on all fours and barked. Mrs. Alicia praised her with a sly grin, even though she didn't really like dogs. In addition to her words, she motivated Limrys by saying that if she behaved obediently, she would be praised. Limrys repeated the action again. She was ashamed, but for some reason she felt goosebumps running down her skin. Seeing what was happening, Gray seemed to fall out of the world. Alicia, noticing her subordinate's reaction, asked him not to misunderstand her. Turning her head away, she commented that she didn't care about this loser. She just felt sorry for Farah because of the situation. Gray couldn't believe such capriciousness from a noble lady. One day, Alicia and Gray arrived at the fountain. Upon arriving at their destination, Lady Farah came and greeted everyone present. Lady Alicia reminded her that they had not seen each other since the ball. Gray stood behind everyone and was in a sleepy state. Lady Farah was friendly in her communication with Mrs. Alicia. She was happy when she learned about Alicia's invitation. Farah was touched by the letter. Alicia smiled and said that she had not done anything special, that it was an exaggeration. But she had no idea that 90% of the letter had been written by a servant. Alicia cheerfully urged the lady to hurry up. A magical day awaited Lady Farah. In response, Lady Farah agreed with an exclamation. Entering the room, everyone bowed their heads and greeted Mrs. Alicia. The employees had been eagerly awaiting her visit. Mrs. Alicia was already accustomed to such a greeting. For her, it was something to be expected. At that moment, Farah watched everything with shining eyes and admiration. For her, it was her first trip to a stylish store. Farah looked at each dress with a beaming face. In her eyes, all the dresses were beautiful. Alicia responded to her admiration by saying that it was natural because she often went shopping and chose the dresses herself. Farah asked again, so everything was done to her taste? The lady replied, no, and told her more about the store. This store only followed fashion trends, constantly imitating and changing designs. The craftsmen were skilled, but they didn't stand out in any way, and there was no point in coming to this particular place. Preserving traditions and following fashion is, of course, important, but that alone is not enough. So she asked them what kind of brand they wanted to become. Moreover, buyers should not blindly chase brands. They should be able to choose for themselves. For the sake of such customers, the store should strive, experiment, and ultimately create true masterpieces. If a store is not capable of this, there is no point in going there. If Farah considers herself a true lady, then she should develop her individual taste and sense of beauty. Farah was amazed. She clearly and confidently agreed. Reaching out her hand, Miss Alicia expressed her generosity. She said that if she liked something, it would be a gift. In her words, splitting the bill in half was unnecessary hassle. In shock, Farah refused. Then Gray approached and began to translate the lady's words. Due to the lady's manner of expression, she could be misunderstood. But what could be done? In fact, she wanted to express as a sign of friendship. She was giving her the dress, and if it made her happy, it was no big deal for her. Smiling broadly, Lady Farah said she understood her words. Alicia, embarrassed and angry, sternly said that the subject should be closed. They would choose a dress and move on. Farah gladly accepted what she said. After shopping, the trio went to Marilee's makeup and hairstyling salon. A man wearing glasses was sitting next to the salon. He looked sad. Seeing him, Farah was frightened. While Farah was standing there, Alicia approached the man. Glancing at her friend, she told the man what the result of his intervention should be. The man smiled contentedly. Farah became even more frightened. Getting to work, the man held the instruments confidently in his hands. Looking at her transformation, Farah was overjoyed. Alicia said that Farah would now become popular in high society. She was happy to see the changes in her friend, who was now unrecognizable. With shining eyes, Farah called her friend over. With the transformation complete, it was time for dinner. Alicia suggested they have dinner together. She had reserved a table at her favorite restaurant. Upon entering, people were stunned. The guests couldn't believe their eyes. Was this really the Ice Queen? But no one guessed the main thing. Who was the beauty standing next to her? One of the female guests snapped at her boyfriend. Who was he staring at? Wasn't he embarrassed that she was sitting in front of him? A host stood at the entrance. He thanked them for waiting and led them to a special table. The table was in the farthest corner of the room, where no one else was sitting except the two of them. Once seated, Miss Alicia warned that the crowd was not of the highest quality. Unfortunately, that was the only downside, according to her. Not paying much attention to this, Farah expressed her gratitude to the lady for such a wonderful day. She was very happy. Since Alicia did not like to beat around the bush, she revealed the real reason for inviting her new friend today. It concerned limries. Leaning back in her chair, Alicia continued her story. She asked her friend if she understood Limri's father's problems. If things continue as they are, the family will simply fall apart. But what will happen to the naive Limris? She asked. Hearing these questions, Miss Farah lowered her head. Lifting her head back up, looking away, and bringing her hand to her mouth, Farah apologized, but she no longer wanted to be deceived by this person. Farah confessed that she was the child of her father's mistress. In the mansion, she was ignored as if she were invisible by her brother and his friends. Even in high society, she was not recognized. Only Limries accepted her as a friend, and that was why she could not forgive her. After hearing this information, Alicia spread her arms and said, "Well, okay, the conversation is over." Farah uttered a short, "eh," with a puzzled look on her face. The conversation was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of the appetizers. Alicia noticed the right time to serve the appetizers. Lady Farah shouted a question. "Why?" Shrugging her shoulders, Alicia explained that she had no obligations to her. She then added that she had come today to charm her specifically. Farah, with horror on her face, wanted to say something, but changed her mind and frowned. Alicia noticed and asked if she understood her words. Farah asked, "Huh?" Lady Alicia was putting everything in order. She said that the store she had shown her was not her favorite. Suddenly changing the subject, Lady Alicia asked her about the skills she had learned and what she had seen during the day. Farah listened attentively. Alicia spoke emphatically about the importance of will, what she wanted, and who she wanted to be. She encouraged reflection and confident action. With such strength, she would be able to gain trust. In a daze, Miss Farah uttered the name of her new friend. Alicia asked about her family. She said they completely ignored her, but did she try to interact with them in any way? According to Ms. Alicia, Farah simply relied completely on Limries, but she still asked her a clarifying question about it. In a state of shock, Farah did not know what to do and, stammering, asked Ms. Alicia this question. Ignoring her words, Ms. Alicia suspected that Farah now saw her as a source of support, so she asked the question directly. Feeling embarrassed, Farah apologized and realized that everything had been thoroughly explained to her. Alicia was surprised and said her name. Mrs. Farah continued her story. In fact, her father was the most upset about this incident. He believed that the honor of the astral family had been disgraced. Seeing her father, Farah was frightened. Farah assured her that she had tried to turn away from her friend, but unfortunately, she couldn't bring herself to ask her father to forgive Limries. All this made her feel distrustful of her. But Farah did not think that all the time they had spent together was a lie. Continuing to argue, she got up from the table, put her hand on her chest, and, already shouting, continued the conversation. In a burst of emotion, Farah shouted that she considered her friend and would not run away from anyone else. Realizing that she had gone too far, Lady Farah immediately apologized and asked to postpone the dinner until another time. Alicia agreed and said that even if she disagreed, she should not hold back and should express her opinion. As she left, she gave a positive answer and said that if Lady Alicia had any problems, she would always be on her side. When she left, Gray noticed that Farah had become stronger. But he wondered, Was that really the lady's goal? He did not receive an answer to his question. Alicia, smiling slyly, noted that it was unusual for a servant to guess such things. But the lady had another goal that he did not know about. Gray inquired about this goal. Alicia turned to face him and, winking, told him about Lady Farah's untouched portion. The servant froze and asked her, "Really?" Alicia calmly explained to him that there were no prying eyes to notice the mistress and servant sitting at the same table. With a smile, Gray expressed his incomparability with the mistress. Sitting down at the table, Alicia asked him, did he only just figure it out? According to her, it was obvious. They raised their glasses and joyfully made a toast. In the evening, Alicia's father came to the mansion and announced that he had found her a groom. Alicia didn't understand. She thought it was just a joke. But her father sternly warned her that this time she must definitely get married. Sitting at the kitchen table, Mrs. Alicia asked the servant how much time had passed since he had arrived. He replied questioningly that it had been about 3 months. Trying to restrain her aggression, she asked when he would finally understand that he dared not serve such food. The lady was served seasonal vegetables stuffed with meat. Gray, upset, asked for more details. Did she really dislike vegetables that much? The lady, shouting, justified herself, saying that she was not some capricious girl who simply disliked them. It was all about taste, and there was no need to exaggerate. Gray, tired and sweating, realized that there was nothing he could do and called May. She approached him and asked what the matter was. He told her about Lady Alicia's rejection of the dish. May replied briefly, "I see," and Gray continued the discussion. He showed her the knife in his hand and explained the fragility of stuffed dishes. They fall apart easily and are difficult to cut with a knife. Gray leaned toward the maid and, with a sly look on his face, offered to feed her for practice, since he was going to cut and serve the dish himself. Overhearing the conversation, Alicia wondered about the meaning of the word feed in this context. Lady Osland wondered how Gray would feed the maid. In her subconscious, Osland romanticized their relationship. She imagined Gray touching her face and opening her mouth to feed her. And Farah, with a blush on her face, opens her mouth and asks him how best to do it. And then they check with their mistress. Do they just need to eat? Alicia burned with jealousy. She couldn't stand to see him being kind to other girls besides her. The cooks watched the scene with interest. Noticing this, Lady Osland questioned their interest and yelled at them to leave immediately. When everyone had left the room, blushing, she opened her mouth and gestured for Gray to feed her. After feeding her with a fork, the lady moaned with pleasure. Licking his lips, Gray asked if the food was tasty. Bringing her finger to her mouth, Alicia moaned and said that one bite wasn't enough to tell. So, sticking out her tongue and looking at him, she asked him to feed her some more. Although she was shy, her jealousy was stronger. Moving even closer to him, there was very little distance between them. As she approached his face, Gray froze. He wanted to say something when suddenly the door creaked. Hearing the creak of the door, Alicia shouted that no one should come in until they had finished eating. After all, she and Gray were having a romantic moment. The guest who entered apologized. It was her father, Duke Osland, the head of the house, Dylan Osland. With a stern expression on his face, he said that he had not thought that there was a place in the mansion where he was not allowed to enter. Alicia and Gray stood there in a panic. Alicia called out to her father in a panic. Then she apologized for what she had said because she thought he was one of the servants. Her father asked if this guy was a servant. Alicia defended him, saying that he was a personal servant. The head of the family reasoned, he is a personal servant, but she is too close to him. This scene was too intimate for him. He asked his daughter to repeat the romantic moment. If there really is no problem, then let her show the romantic moment. As for the servant, the head of the family had received reports from Maya more than once. Dylan asked if he was correct in assuming that his name was Gray. Gray hesitantly agreed. The servant's full name was Gray Wrecker. It was a great honor for the servant to meet the head of the family. Closing his eyes, Dylan continued the conversation. After all, his daughter had just turned 17, and she had already made 16 boys her personal servants. He demanded an explanation. With her father's permission, Alicia replied that age and gender were insignificant if a person was talented. Looking down at his daughter, Dylan asked her to swear that there were no personal feelings involved in the appointment. Hesitating in her response, the lady tried to say something. He continued the discussion. It was worth it for him to visit her for the first time in a long time and find her in such a situation. Dylan realized his mistake in leaving his daughter under Maya's sole supervision. Alicia shed a tear. Waving her arm, Alicia hysterically begged him to stop. All the anger and resentment that had built up over the years came pouring out. With tears streaming down her face, Lady Alicia screamed about how much time had passed since she had been left in this country house, and about the misunderstanding she had to go through all this time. Having made up her mind, Alicia confirmed that Gray was the first. Her father did not understand what she had said and asked a clarifying question. What was Gray the first at? Without answering, Alicia stared intently into his eyes and remained silent. Dylan admitted that he had indeed neglected her. He didn't know how she had been living all this time, so he came to her. Dylan explained that his daughter had been expelled from high society and removed from her studies. But if she behaved like this at the estate, there was only one way forward. Without losing his stern expression, he approved the choice of a new fiancé for his daughter. According to him, this time she must definitely get married. Shocked by the news, she asked again. She thought it was nonsense, but her father reported that an agreement had been reached with the other party, so it was official. Covering her face with a fan, Alicia said with a sly look that doing stuff like this without the bride knowing was too much. Didn't he think so? Trying to fix the situation somehow, she asked if she could at least have a little bit of a say in the matter. Dylan stood in a pose, one hand on his hip and the other gesturing, reminding her of his daughter's words. His daughter had spoken of the inviolability of others towards her, so he chose himself, as it happened. For the lady, it wasn't over yet. She was sure that another suitor would run away from her, as if with his tail between his legs. Just like all the previous ones. Gray felt the same way, because Alicia had been through a bunch of engagements, and no one could put up with such terrible behavior. But the head of the family decided to finish everyone off with the conclusion that this time everything would be different. Alicia asked enthusiastically about this confidence. She even sincerely admitted to having a difficult personality. Dylan confirmed her words, but added that the groom was unique. He knew about all her antics and still asked for Alicia's hand in marriage. She and Gray were stunned. Alicia lowered her head. Gray asked if it was possible to postpone the conversation about the engagement until another day. Dylan replied that he was right and that he believed Alicia also needed time to be ready for this. Dylan turned and left, saying that when he came back next time, they should be prepared in advance. Alicia asked why Gray didn't refuse him. Gray replied that he was also against a marriage she did not want. In that case, Alicia asked him to help her escape from the mansion. Gray asked if she didn't understand anything. Alicia was surprised. He asked if she had ever caught live insects and then eaten them. Alicia asked what. Gray explained that in the summer, when there is grass and insects, it is still possible to survive, but in the winter it is difficult to find food, so you have to deceive your empty stomach with water from the river. Alicia tried to call him, but Gray continued talking, saying that when she didn't have a bath, she would wipe her body with a slightly damp cloth. And then her house would be even smaller than half of this dining room, and there would be a terrible draft inside. Alicia asked what he was talking about. Gray replied that he was talking about the world he used to live in. Alicia assured him that they would not live like that and that she would find a job. Gray told her that they would catch her and take her back to the mansion, and that he would be sentenced to death. In that case, Alicia suggested they flee abroad. Gray replied that he didn't think they would be able to leave the country successfully. He thought she simply wouldn't be able to endure the harsh conditions of life on the run. After all, it was impossible. He was born into the lowest class of society, into the family of a failure of father. No matter how hard he tried to improve himself, he would never be worthy of her. So he told her to think seriously about this engagement. And of course, if she didn't like the groom, he would refuse. Alicia turned away, and then she left silently. Gray stood with his head down, thinking about what it would be like if he had been born into an aristocratic family. 2 weeks passed. Gray went into Alicia's room and said, "Good morning." She responded indifferently. Gray was surprised that Alicia, who used to have a hard time getting up in the morning, had now woken up and gotten herself ready. Alicia asked why he was looking at her like that. Gray replied that it was nothing. He tried to tell her about today's schedule, but Alicia said she was going to talk to May about the flower beds. Gray replied that he would go too. Alicia told him that he should rest and that there was no need to follow her around all the time. After that incident, Alicia began to distance herself from him. They almost stopped communicating. When he entered the room, he saw her standing there in her nightgown. He was surprised that she had even taken a bath on her own. Alicia asked, "What? Do I need to ask permission to wash myself?" Gray replied, "Absolutely not." May ran up to him and spoke to him. Alicia told her that they had nothing to talk about. May obeyed and left. Gray did not understand Alicia's feelings at all. He tried to figure out how to solve this. He punched the wall and asked himself what he should do. Behind him, someone asked if he had been removed from his position as a servant. Gray turned around and saw Maya. She said it was good that she was passing by. After all, he should realize that every word and action could discredit their mistress's reputation. Gray apologized. Maya suggested that he did not see himself as a servant and had desires that were inappropriate for his position. She asked him to think about it. Gray reflected on the fact that he had not thought about how much the distance between him and Alicia would annoy him. As she left, Maya said that in any case, he would have to accept what would happen over the weekend. Gray asked her what she meant. Maya replied that she had heard that the fiancé would be coming to the mansion to see their mistress. Gray asked, the mistress's fiancé? In that case, he would definitely be waiting for him. Meanwhile, in the garden, Alicia's fiancé was eagerly awaiting his meeting with her. To be continued. Thanks for watching. Write your feedback in the comments. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. See you soon.